Hello, this is Kelly Hammond. Welcome to Resiliency Coach Podcast. This podcast showcases people who have faced difficult times and how they got through it. These experiences are real and sometimes raw. The people who share their stories are here to tell you that you're not alone in your struggle. They share the tools and resources they use in healing. If you're looking for solutions for getting through tough times, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Today, I'm interviewing a wonderful friend, and her name is Brooke Santina. And Brooke is a former law enforcement as well as an author. So, Brooke, thank you so much for being my guest today and for sharing your story with us. Would you please share your story?
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Sometimes things happen in your life and you don't recognize what's happening in your life until you feel better. And so I like that you're doing this. I appreciate that you're doing this for people that maybe they'll see themselves in somebody else's story. So, so my situation, everybody's had many, I'm in my 50s. I've been around the block a bit, but the one that I recently worked on and was healed from was post-traumatic stress. And post-traumatic stress disorder hit me in a shocking way. I had no idea that I felt it or that I had it. I was raised with an alcoholic mother. And that's it's the thing. A lot of people are. No, it's not like shocking. However, there are things that happen when a parent is alcoholic that the kids don't always know. I didn't recognize, honestly, that she was alcoholic or that there had been abuse in the family or things like that until I was much, much older, and she had been passed away for like 10 years. So when I finally recognized that, I went to Al-Anon. There's a group for adult children of alcoholics. And so I have gone to that group because about, I guess, 10 years ago, I realized that, there's some things about me. Relationships are tough for me when it comes to trusting in romantic relationships. I have great friends, not a problem. But when it came to the whole romantic thing, it wasn't working. And there were other things. I felt I was always looking for approval. I would call people like my dad, and we'd have these conversations. And sometimes I just felt like I had a discomfort, like I wasn't getting something from that conversation. It was an approval seeking thing. And it was ingrained in me from childhood, trying to get my mother's approval. So I had done that from bosses. I mean, there's a number of things. There's too many to mention today, but the ones that I felt were approval seeking. Often people become alcoholics or marry alcoholics if they were raised by one. There's a lot of guilt when you stand up for yourself. So that was a thing that when things happened in school or in work and somebody came at me, I shut down. I would just be quiet. And then later I'd think, why didn't I say this? Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I stand up for myself? But it was consistent. You lose the ability to feel. I think this was one of the biggies for me. I didn't know I didn't have feelings. I thought I had feelings, you get excited, you get happy, you get sad and whatever. But I did realize later in life that, there is a complete lack of feeling. And that when that hit me, again, you don't know what you're missing. I thought everybody's family was the same. I thought everybody had a parent that you couldn't know every day when you got home from school what you were walking into. One day you were absolutely the greatest thing to walk the earth, and the next day you were a piece of doggy doo, and boy, did they like to let you know in so many terms. So love, to me, the way I learned love was like a roller coaster. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. And if they like you that day, you're great and they love you. But if they don't, it was inconsistent. The one thing I used to say when I started to heal was the one thing in my life that was consistent was inconsistency as a kid. So after that kind of upbringing, I ended up marrying my mother. My mother passed away in 2000 right after Y2K didn't happen. And I became a deputy a year after that. I got divorced a year after that. And, law enforcement was a very empowering job for me. It was a completely different, I had to be the authority. I had to learn to stand up for myself. So there was some real positives there. However, when I did that, sometimes there were negative consequences. And it turns out after mom passed, since she was the one I was always looking for that approval from, I ended up marrying basically my mother. I got divorced, and 4 years later married a person I met at work, and he was exactly like my mom. So years go by, 11 years actually. And when I finally realized, you grow as the time goes on, you learn that, I don't like this feeling. Why am I so angry or hurting in my own household? Why is this person calling me these names? Why, after a while, you just go, you know what? I'm done with this. This is not okay. And so I did go to Al-Anon. There was an Al-Anon group in Carson City here for adult children of alcoholics. And that's where I learned this list of all these different things that were very, they're just traits that you learn as a child of an alcoholic. And I was seeing the same things in the spouse, and I was recognizing more and more about what abuse is and what alcoholism is, and why I didn't need this in my life. I didn't drink very much because I knew what it did to people. I didn't want my kids to deal with that. So, but they still had to deal with other things that I didn't recognize, like this list of issues that happens to people. So anyway, the whole thing about recovery for me was, I finally left spouse number 2 and moved to Carson, bought a little house, and I'm in my home. I'm working for the Department of Corrections at the time. I was the media person, and we had O.J. Simpson in our prison, which was really, really fun for me because everybody came to me to talk to him. We didn't do interviews, but they tried. And I was talking to media personnel or representatives of media all over the world for a good year. It was really fun and very exciting and interesting. And I realized at that time I started to come home. I'm living alone, have a dog, and it's just the two of us. But when I got home from work, I noticed I was looking at my sofa. I had an alarm system, and before I would turn off my alarm system, I would check my sofa. I'm like, what am I looking for? Who's going to be there? Well, I was looking for my ex, who doesn't have a key to my house and isn't going to be there. But why would I think what was happening? Why would I think that? Well, if you're in danger, you use a different key. You use 9111 or something to turn off my alarm. So I was like, wow, I've been separate or, alone now without a spouse for a year. And it was almost exactly to the day that I moved out that I started doing this. Then I went to a dinner with some girlfriends, and we were talking about things. And all of a sudden I saw a television nearby at the restaurant. There's a bar restaurant, and the television had NASCAR on it, where my spouse had always watched NASCAR, and I started to hyperventilate. Like, what's wrong with me? Oh, I know what's wrong with me. This is PTSD. And it freaked me out because I didn't expect to ever have that. I had written a book years before. In 2013, it came out, called Dish Rags to Dirtbags. It was about a housewife who became a deputy sheriff. And in that book, it's a novel. It's based on things that I know from being a deputy sheriff and having been a housewife, but it's not exactly my story. So I wrote it as fiction, but I had a character, which there was no real character like this, that had PTSD from being in the military. The main character's husband was this character, and I had done research so I could write, efficiently and effectively about PTSD. So I knew what it was pretty quickly, and I also knew that it doesn't go away on its own. PTSD does not leave. It doesn't just dissipate. there's work that has to be done and things you have to face. And that is when I started the process of healing. I had done many years of counseling before that, and I never really felt like it went away. I mean, I had a counselor for like 10 years, my first marriage. We had a decent marriage. We just didn't connect. After a while, it wasn't an abusive situation. Second one became much more dramatic. And the one thing about you get very impulsive, you get very addicted to excitement when you have had an up and down life like that, when you were raised with an alcoholic parent. So that kind of explained the deputy sheriff job. It kind of explained this relationship. So anyway, I'm now out of the relationship, and I'm wondering why I'm freaking out. What's happening? Why am I having this fear? So one of the things, when you stuff your feelings, when you are raised again with an alcoholic parent, you do not have the luxury of getting angry and letting that out, because it just would come back at you in tenfold. So your emotions of sadness or of anger, the good emotions you could show, but the bad emotions, if you want, I know there are no good and bad emotions, they're all neutral really, but you learn that in therapy. So sadness, any sort of grief or sadness or anger, I would just stuff inside and never feel, not realizing that. So here I am, suddenly having these feelings, because as you learn later, that if you stuff your feelings, they will show up, whether you like it or not. And they're going to come when they're ready, when your body, it's like it manifests itself inside you somehow. I had in the past had stomach pains. I got told by the gastroenterologists that you just can't have coffee anymore. You just can't have alcohol anymore. You can't have chocolate. Those are things that happen when you get older. So I was like, okay, well, geez, that's a bummer. Come to find out, it was just anger manifesting in my body. So I have this PTSD. I have this, and I got a counselor here in Carson who was wonderful. And we talked about it. I got some books. I went back to my Al-Anon group and talked to those people that I was close to that knew me well, because when you go through an entire program, a 12-step program, you really do bond with the people that you're in the group with, because you're hearing each other's stories firsthand, and sometimes they're ugly, and you got to be there for each other. So I went back to those people. I went to my counselor. I found books on this type of behavior. The things that happened was when I was in the relationship, I was used to it, because again, I was raised with this roller coaster life. So I was living again that roller coaster life, which felt familiar to me, not comfortable, but I understood it. So it was okay in my mind. I understood what I needed to do. When my husband came at me with a gun and said, I'm going to blow my head off and you're going to watch, I would say, again, you've said this every month since we were married. And I would just be very calm. Eventually he would go to the restroom and I would take the gun and unload it. And I would hide those bullets in my tampon box, because he's never going to look there. And I would put it back where it was, unload it, and then I'd go to bed. But never feeling the fear of having something like that happen. So here's the fear coming at me in this PTSD. So what that feels like, I mean, I was married 11 years, we were together 15. So I measured at one point how often those blow-ups happened, and it was once a month. So there were small arguments that happened throughout the month, and then once a month I'd have the big one where I had to unload the gun. So when you're married 11 years, that's over 100 times, and you just don't realize it. So when you think about, or when I thought about what I was feeling, I started waking up like 4 a.m. and feeling fear for his new girlfriend. I felt like, what do I say if I run into them? How do I handle this? And I would just for hours mull these things over in my mind over and over and over. Why? I don't even live in the same city as him. I'm not going to run into these people. But I had to, let this go. It went over and over. Every night I'd wake up with something, and it had to do with not having, one problem was I didn't take the initiative to involve law enforcement when he was threatening me, or threatening himself. Really, he never came at me and said he was threatening me, but it was always, you're going to lose the house without my income. So I'm going to do this and you're going to hurt, basically. And I recognized that it was this pattern, and I realized how often it happened. Well, of course, you're going to feel something eventually. So I would wake up and I would feel guilt that I didn't call law enforcement. But when you are law enforcement, the last thing you want to involve is law enforcement, and he is too. Now, if in fact he had been convicted of domestic abuse, he would have lost his gun, which I would have then lost my house, and my kids would have lost their security. And there was just, it wasn't worth it to me. My children were never around when this happened, which is interesting because the mantra was, I can't control myself. But yet it never happened. My children were through my first marriage, and they were over quite often. It never happened when they were here. Thank goodness, because had it happened when they were here, we would have left and it would have been over. But he knew that, and he loved them, and he wanted to be around them. So he just kept his cool when they were around. And then when they left, that's when the behaviors begin. So anyway, I am now in bed and I'm thinking about this all the time. I'm up every night thinking about why now he has a new girlfriend and she's going to be feeling this, and she's not law enforcement. She's not going to know how to handle a gun. And what is she going to do when he does this, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just going over and over and over and feeling huge amounts of guilt. And my heart would race when I thought I might run into them. Again, it's not based on reality. It's just a feeling, but it's feelings that I never felt coming out. And boy, were they were hard to ignore. And at the time, working at the Nevada Department of Corrections, I was traveling quite a bit because we had most of our prisons in Vegas. There's Ely, there's Lovelock, there's all these places. And so I would get on a plane quite often. And that was something that was kind of a trigger for me because my spouse worked at the airport, and that was a thing. So when I thought about, oh my gosh, I might run into him there, it was very difficult to get myself to the airport to travel. I did, but it was a thing. I had to think it through. I was up all night. And then I was like, I cannot continue with this fear and this complete lack of control of my feelings. It would show up anytime. Didn't even matter. So I got a few people involved in my healing, which I really want to mention because they're amazing. And so what I found was the gastroenterologists, again, if I had stomach issues, they would say it was, just age, and you don't do that anymore. Well, I went to a gal who was a craniosacral therapist. Her name's Amy Lewis. She's out of Reno. Her business is Cranio Wave. And I met her through eWomen, which is a group and I had been a part of after I wrote my book. I wanted to, advertise. So I went and met eWomen. I joined the group, and she was giving out discounts. I knew nothing about it. I just went because I felt I needed to. And she was amazing. So it's energy work. So if you think of your body as energy, so much of us is made up of energy. And that energy has a flow, and it has to go somewhere. So one day I went in there, and you just lay on a table. It's like any other massage, but you're on your back and just sitting up. I'm talking to her, and she would pinpoint certain areas. What's this? What is this feeling here? What is this? And one day she just on my side of my abdomen, she says, what is this? And I knew immediately there was a rock in there that had been in there since I was a child. I didn't know that was a bad thing. And she said, what is this? So I started, and I would just tell her, well, and I just lay there with my eyes closed, and I'd say, I don't know, but I see red, or I see purple, or I feel this, or I see mountains or whatever. And you just talk things through as she puts her hand on that spot. And 10 minutes later, I'm tearing up because I realized it had to do with my mother and it had to do with my upbringing. And I had no idea it was in there or that it was going to be able, somebody would be able to feel it and ask me about it. And it dissipated that day and it never came back. And I knew this woman could help me heal from a lot of things. So that was a major part of my healing. The very first thing I ever had participated in that made things go away and not come back. Because, I went to counseling and I would talk things out, but I'd always think about them again and they'd come back and I'd journal and they'd still be there. And this went away. It was amazing. So I went to her for a number of years. And I also got involved with a Reiki master in town in Carson. That was Susan Fritz at Serenity Studios. And she was able to pinpoint the anger that I felt. So one day I was having those stomach pains again. I knew I couldn't have my foods that I loved and I couldn't do whatever because I'm getting older. And I went to her and she said, no. After we did a Reiki session for about an hour and I sat up and she says, you're full of anger. I said, I am not. There's no anger in me. Why would I be angry? And she's like, I'm just telling you, that's what this is. This is your body manifesting anger in your stomach. And I thought that sounded crazy. I don't feel angry. That's dumb. But I came home and I wrote. I said, okay, I'll journal. And I wrote 8 pages in like minutes of everything I was angry about. And it went way back. Not just parental stuff or whatever, but jobs, bosses, spouses, boyfriends, friends, anything. I mean, there was just so many things that came out on that paper. In 20 minutes, I had like 8 pages and I thought, I'm going to burn these. I'm going to get rid of this anger. And I went outside and it happened to be a full moon that night. So I lit them on fire in my little, fire pit and just asked the moon to use that energy I don't know if the moon has energy, but I like to think that people say it does. And I just said, take this away. And I really felt like it happened. It felt like something vacuumed all this anger out of me. And that's never come back. So there's different things that are very hokey pokey, if you will, that aren't something that I would have ever thought would work for me, that really, really worked for me. There's things in this world that we need to tap into that we would never necessarily, I would never done this time. I know I'm healed and here's how I know. So the fear of running into that person was very evident for about 2 years. The fear, the waking up at night, all of it. It took about 2 years to get out of my system. But the reason I know it's out of my system is because I got a call one evening about that. It was a call from him and he was calling me to tell me, and I had not spoken to him in many, probably a year at least, if not longer. And he called and asked for me and I didn't even recognize his voice. And we had a conversation. When I did hear who it was, I was waiting for that flood of fear to come, that adrenaline. Never came. We had a conversation. I turned over, went right to sleep, no problems. So that was my test of all tests. And it's definitely healed. But again, it took a lot of work. It took a lot of journaling and it took a lot of reading and it took a lot of energy work to get to the point where I know I'm healed. I'm sure there's things that I could still work on. My need for approval has been much better. It's still there sometimes. I'll call my brother and I'm waiting for him to go, what? How dare that? I'm waiting for that. Yeah, you're great. You did fine. But doesn't always come. Sometimes it does. But I don't feel the need so badly as I used to. I definitely don't judge myself anywhere near as harshly as I used to. That's one of the traits that adult children of alcoholics have a tendency to do. They react instead of act. So they're always waiting for something to happen and then you react, which actually I think made me a fairly decent deputy, because that's what that job is reacting to somebody else and their behavior. So, and I don't have any guilt standing up for myself anymore, which is great. Although I do have to sometimes rein in my excitement. Sometimes I feel like you have something like this happens and you're just having a regular conversation with someone and you realize, oh my goodness, there's evidence of that healing. And you get so excited that you get kind of goofy and these people don't understand. So there's things that you still have to work on, but there is no more fear. The fear is gone. And love is what I'm trying to learn to feel. I'll share a quick story with you on that. You think you know what love is. People think they know what love is. But if it's been a roller coaster your whole life, then you really don't know what love is. At my counselor one day, my children had sent me a gift. This is towards the end of my 2 years of working this through. So I'm getting better at this point. I'm starting to feel the the anger and write things down, feel things before someone has to tell me about it. So this one day, my children had sent me a gift, and it was for Mother's Day, and it was a Harry Potter book with the illustrations. During the divorce situation, one of the things that got thrown out was my collection of Harry Potter, and my kids and I had been those freaks that got the glasses on and the cape and went there at midnight at Barnes and Noble and stood outside in a line and got your book. So we were those people. And now, years later, my kids are adults and my books were all thrown out in this move by my spouse, and he never replaced them. So they decided to replace them. And I got the first one and I was so touched. So I went to my counselor because I had an appointment afterwards. I'm like, look what I got. Look at this. And I open it. I go, look, my kids sent me this little note and this book. And she says, how do you feel? I go, great. She goes, no, in your body right now, what do you feel? I said, I feel a warmth in my chest. I feel a calmness and a peace and a warmth. And she said, that is love. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? That is love. So as sad as that sounds to not know what love is, I actually finally felt that peace or that feeling of being accepted and being cared for. And she said, everyone needs to feel cared for, loved and cared for. That was one thing my counselor always said, you need to feel loved and cared for. And that's what my kids did by sending me that book. Now I have 4. They're on a roll. I think there's one more out there they're going to work on getting, but I love it. It's such a great thing for them who I read these books to as babies, or they were pretty small. For them to replace that in my life does really warm my heart and makes me feel loved. So feelings are hard. Feelings are scary for me. I'm still not real good at the romantic relationships. Haven't figured that out yet. Dated a lot. I do know what I want in life though. And I do know that feeling of love, and it's not just the excitement. It's not just the stuff that you get when you fall in love with someone. That feeling is great, but I need to know, I need to learn more about what love is, long term. So I think that's about as much of my story as I can come up with right now.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing your story with us today. And if you had one piece of advice to somebody that may be listening right now, that may be in the throngs of the difficulty that you went through, what would that piece of advice or suggestion be to them?
I just got chills when you asked me that. I know exactly. So when you're in the throngs of it and you don't know when the next panic attack is going to come, when your heart's going to start racing, or when you're going to have those guilty feelings or those tears are going to come. And when they do, it's very scary because you can't control it. You're going to get through it. It's possible to get through this and never have that feeling again. And it's just a matter of doing the work. And the work doesn't have to be horrible. It's not terrible. It's actually pretty easy if you find somebody that works, something that works for you, like the Reiki or the cranial sacral. Or there was a book called Why Does He Do That? That book helped me a ton because it explained exactly the type of person that I was married to and why those things were happening. And that helped a lot, just to know it wasn't me. It wasn't what I said that set him off. It's something from his history. It's completely different. You take it personally, but it's not you. So the biggie is when you feel there is no hope and you don't see the other end, do not give up, because there is hope and there is a way out, and you are on that path. You just got to stick with it and find what works for you. But it feels so good. It was terrifying. I will say that is probably one of the most scary things I've ever been through, because PTSD is so unpredictable. You don't know when it's going to hit. You don't know what's going to make you feel funky and frightened, and things that are completely counterproductive to where you are. At dinner with friends, you're having a panic attack. Why? It's crazy. You feel like you've lost your mind. Don't give up.
Great advice. Thank you so much. I appreciate the vulnerability and the bravery it takes to share personal stories such as yours, as well as giving that advice that not to give up. This is not the opportunity to give up. This is the opportunity to dig in those heels, and it may be an uphill battle and it may look dark, but there is a way. And there are resources out there. And I love that you said that there are those alternative resources. Those alternative resources, often we have to be in so much pain before we seek them. And unfortunately, we have to come to that point. But thankfully, there are those resources. There are so many different resources. And I'm glad that you mentioned those ones. Those are great resources, as well as I love that you mentioned Al-Anon too, that was part of your healing, and to be able to use resources such as family or friends or groups such as Al-Anon is definitely a wise thing to do when we're in a struggle, and such as the one you were going through. Any struggle is good to be able to seek out help and assistance. So I have one last question for you. How can somebody get in contact with you if they'd like to?
Oh, you can email me at my name, which is Brooke Santina, BrookeSantina, one word, at Yahoo. That you can also Google me, because I do have a website from my book. I'm not on it much, but BrookeSantina.com is a thing. And I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I just use my regular name.
Excellent. And thank you again for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. It's great. It's really a positive thing that you're doing.
Thank you, audience, for listening to the story of Brooks. And remember, there is a way through your difficulty. Please seek out resources and people that can and will help you. Now, if you're looking for an alternative tools for handling difficult times or moving ahead in life, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Hope you all have a blessed day and a wonderful life. Goodbye.